So next up, our final presenter, Eunjoo, if I'm saying that correctly. Eunjoo Kim, who is with Qualcomm, and maybe sharing with us something Vuforia related, maybe. So.
Sure, why not?
All right, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Great. Finally. Good afternoon, everyone. I guess this is the last day, last session, and I'm the last speaker. So thanks for staying till this time. My name is Eunjoo Kim. I'm a senior staff user experience designer working with the Vuforia team, Qualcomm's augmented reality solution. I'm gonna share hands-on design tips for designing user experience for augmented reality applications. I have done user experience design for mobile domain for many years. But working for AR design, I see such unique design challenges because users have to interact with the physical objects and environment. So as a designer, I need to consider not only on-screen user interaction design, I also have to consider what's beyond the device that user has to interact. So my talk is going to cover some design tips that you need to consider when you design on-screen user interaction piece, and then something that you need to consider beyond the device. Okay, let's talk about user interaction design. This shows that end-to-end app stages. Beside pre-AR session and post-AR session, during those augmented reality session, there are 4 major event stage that I want to share my insight. At the startup, when AR session just starting, and while application is working to detect your target image, and once that application recognizes that target image, how you transition this real world to digital space. Now, once you have your AR content, what to do with that? I want to share really quick design tips for those 4 major events. First, for the startup, help users to understand how it works. It might be obvious to you, but it's not to many end users. Augmented reality is some cool stuff, but still new to mainstream users that I have observed. I have observed many times that AR application works really great at developers' hands. Oh, it works totally fine. But whenever we give this application to end user and test with end user, it just doesn't work. The problem is that users do not know what you know in terms of what to point at, what am I supposed to point, and what's the angle that I need to use, any technical limitation, or how long do I have to hold. Users just don't know those natural things from developers' mindset. So when you start up at the first time, it's still recommended to give really quick, easy to understand tutorial. This is a sample that I want to share that we designed for American Apparel application that they developed for their shopping app. We showed this a first time tutorial that point the product display, it will scan, and from that time, you can just use this application for shopping. You can develop this kind of first-time tutorial, like really quick animation, or if your app is just really simple enough, you can just go with a static page pointing that at least guide user what to do with your application. Second, engage users while your app is working. If the technology that you choose for your application does not have any delay in terms of responding time, that's such great, you may not have this problem. But if you anticipate any delay for your application, then it's really recommended to give visual clue to user that while this app is working. Many AR failure that I observed happened because users do not hold the device long enough until your app is done working. So what happens is that user pointed the target image, oh, it's not working, it's not working, it's not working, and frustrated, what am I supposed to do? Where you have to just a little bit of longer for this application to work, right? So giving that those visual, compelling visual indicator that this app is working, especially with the real-time feedback so that user can adjust, cooperate your application is kind of recommended. This is a kind of the solution, design solution that we developed it for cloud recognition service that I can share. We had a little bit of delay because cloud recognition solution has to work with a server, so there was a little bit network delay. We used that this scanning line as well understandable metaphor to indicate that this application working, and then we show that this green dots to indicate that what application sees. So the user can understand, oh, I see which green dots versus I don't see any, meaning that this target might not good target for this application. So really good visual indicator for user to understand and cooperate with your application. The third, when your application recognize your target image, how you're gonna transition this real world to digital space. There are various different ways that you can do, but I'm gonna share 3 different types that you can consider depending on your application. First, we named it as grab and go type. What it is that it looks at the real object, it grabs the real things from the scene in a transition to the digital space. So I will show you the sample for that. We use this type for the American Opera sample apps as well. So you point at the target image. As you can see, it grabs that real object and then transition to the 2D space. What's really benefit of this type is that users do not have to hold the device to use this AR application. Once it grabs that information from the real space, you are free to go. You can just use that application at your comfortable distance. And the second type is just typical AR augmented reality contents that you have this 3D content registers on top of the target image. This is kind of typical AR contents that we see. Really immersive experience. You can do a lot of cool things with a physical interaction with those target image with your 3D content. Disadvantage of this type is that user will get tired pretty soon. So depending on your app goal and what you want to do, you choose this option versus other option. Or you can mix those 2 together as a hybrid concept. So what it is that you can augment your content when target is in view on top, but once the user moves the device away, instead of losing the content, you can make it the content follows you. So you can do this hybrid concept also depending on, again, your app goals and design the task. Once you transition to the digital space, the critical part, the beauty of this part is that connecting the real world to digital space, giving the really clue and a story how this digital content is related to the real world that you just came from. One of the sample that I choose is Viking footwear AR application. I don't know if you have seen this application. As you can see here, what they do is that they do advertisement for their footwear. On the left side, that's advertisement that they have on the magazine. They don't display any product information, any product picture, but using AR, it kind of complete the picture of your advertisement. By looking at the AR application, just intuitively you can understand what it is. It is the foodies on the ground and the product on top. So you don't have to guess what just happened. You just intuitively understand what it is. It's great to do with augmentation. You can also do this kind of type by showing the path. If you choose to do the grab and go type, you can still do that by showing the path so that user can just immediately understand where this digital space came from. There's no confusion what just happened. User just knows that it just came from the real world. So that's kind of my 4 design, the tips that I shared. While you are designing your application, you really have to think beyond the device. Probably your app might be easiest app that you can ever design, but still some users cannot figure out why it's not working. We have done a couple of different user studies with our prototype apps, and I want to share some insight with that. There are many insights that I want to share, but because we have such short time today, I want to share those 3 characteristics: position, size, and distance between the target image, the physical object that you are going to interact and then with your device. My first insight that I want to share is, where is a target image? This is a typical American Apparel store scene. They have this product sign throughout the store. Their goal was to use existing those product sign as their AR target image. And they wanted to develop this AR application to recognize their target image and then provide more product information, product detail information. We designed the application and then we conducted a usability study in our lab. Everything was fine, everyone was happy. The problem was found at the field testing that we did at the store. Problem was, some product signs were not easily reachable to some consumers. As you can see here, she was not tall enough to really point the target image. Application is nothing to do with your application, but it's really a thing to do with your physical characteristics. So American Apparel had to adjust their product sign location to make this app usable. Second thing, what's the likely distance from a target? We did our usability study on the prototype app that we did with a newspaper advertisement. We had those 3 samples, one with a full page advertisement, and one small one on top and a small one on bottom. We wanted to test if there are anything that we need to consider in this matter. What happened during the testing was that most likely for the newspaper use case, user will lay the newspaper on the table while sitting. So natural distance was this kind of distance. With a full page newspaper, because it was just too big, and then user had to fill that image within the camera view, it almost forces user to have really awkward position that, oh, I cannot really fill that image in my view. Or it almost forces user to stand up, which was not desirable to user experience. So our users reported that it was really difficult to use this application. I cannot use it. They reported a lot easy to use with a smaller target with this application. So with this one, even though you have full real estate, the space for full page advertisement, it doesn't mean that you have to make the full image as AR target. You can still define small size region as your AR target and then have that better user experience for that, your application. The third point that I want to share is the position of the target image dictates how user interact with the application. Same study that we did with the newspaper advertisement. What we observed from this one is that when advertisement position of the ad was on the bottom of that newspaper, naturally users pointed their device at the straightforward angle, just like that. What happened is that because they made a device angle at the straightforward angle, they revealed the 3D content at like this angle. So some users didn't even recognize this was a 3D content. Was looking at this, okay, I see that like top, I was just interacting like that. When ad position was little top position like that, naturally we observed that user pointed that the device at little bit 45-degree angle. So naturally, the 3D content was revealed at the 3D angle, so our users just instantly, immediately realized that this was a 3D object. Oh, I want to just see this 3D content. So depending on the position of the target, it really dictates how users is going to use your application. So that's the three different insights that I wanted to share with you. So that's a really hands-on design tips that I presented today for the interaction design. Things that you need to consider when you are starting up application while app is detecting, and you are time to transition from real world to digital space, and what to do with the content design. And again, I need to really emphasize on user experience part that you have to think beyond the device. It's really not just for that interaction design on the screen. There are more things that you need to consider in terms of the physical interaction, the human factor matter. That's all I have today. Thank you so much.
Test. Okay, and so open it up for questions. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, first of all, thank you to all of you. You left us speechless, but in a good way, absolutely. So you have to sometimes educate the user. Do you find sometimes you have to educate your team as well, your client, that you have to convince them that this is the best way to design this application or experience?
Yes, sure. So what happened, there are two aspects. I've observed many times with our internal developers or whoever developed this AR application, what happened is that, this is so fascinating, it is so fast, it took only 2 seconds. It used to take 4 seconds, so we improved like 100% in terms of the performance. But from user point of view, 2 seconds is still long, it's not acceptable, right? So I need to really convince that our internal team that what's acceptable from user experience point of view, not from how much we improved from ourselves. It really doesn't matter. It's really whether our users will accept it or not. With a client, yes, there is a little bit of a training portion as well. Really good thing is that showing the usability study report with a client is really good data that you can back up your design rationale about it. That's really, and especially the field testing that I shared with American Operator, that's kind of thing that you really need to understand the contextual design rationale that why you propose this design versus that design.
Other questions? Well, okay, now it worked. I have one. Are these type of guidelines available on the Vuforia site for developers? Because as an engineer, we don't always make the prettiest of things with the best UI. So I'm just curious.
Yes, there are design guidelines. If you go to developer.vuforia.com, there is a dev guideline section. And there are design guidelines for you to consider. There are more stuff than I presented today, so check that out. And there are other design considerations as well.
Thank you. And anything else? Well, here we go.
Hi, can you guys talk about usability testing regarding to augmented reality? Because for mobile UX design, it's a much more standardized format for usability testing and QA. So what is the format for AR?
You want to talk about it?
Well, I'll speak from my experience working with layers. So back when we were doing geospatial AR primarily, of course, there was no standard users testing format, but it was really interesting because it presented a lot of testing problems, right? You have to go out into the real world. If you're testing things that are geospatially located, you have to go and actually go to the actual site. And so recruiting users and getting them to the right place is interesting. Sometimes you actually have to build a test rig that allows you to be in a different location so that you can test. So I think you have a set of problems that don't exist when you're testing a product necessarily. And then, just because it's a combined sort of digital and physical experience that you're measuring, I mean, you almost need a couple of people to observe, because you need somebody to kind of stand back and watch the kind of macro picture of what a user is doing. But you also need a way to kind of be close in to see how the user's interacting, potentially on a tiny little screen. So, yeah.
That's kind of interesting challenges that we face within our team as well, that how can you test user experience? There is a certain things that you can test in the usability lab, but it's really limited. You have to situate the situation in order to really understand. I've seen really interesting papers from Mobile Kai conference last year. One was from the Facebook research lab. What he presented, I guess we have time for sharing. What his mission was that only low fidelity prototype is really critical to get that idea whether your design idea will work or not. But in order to build a low fidelity augmented reality prototype is really challenging, right? Building that working prototype is very expensive for AR. You need to have a server pinging with your prototype. It's really expensive. So his team's mission was that how we can build a low fidelity prototype, and then he showed a really interesting ideas. He did 3 different fidelity prototype. One was that, it's really funny, he had this physical the device. He knocked down this device, and he just made a frame with it, and then had that. He made a kind of dummy phone, and he made some clay to make it like almost a real phone. He took this phone at the field. Their idea was that how they can use this AR solution for the social connecting for their Facebook application. What they did was that with your dummy, and then they had a puppet, the paper puppet. There was a facilitator next to the candidate, and then while the candidate was painting the device, there was a person that actually doing a puppet that, there's your friend, there's your friend, there's a David, there is a Mary, something like that, really to simulate that augmentation of that experience. That was kind of really interesting idea that he said it didn't work out well. It was too disturbing to user that, what are you doing kind of thing. So really couldn't get that, whether that design will work or not. But the mission that he tried, I really appreciated that, the low fidelity prototype that he wanted to do. And then he wanted to test this user experience in that environment and setting. Another interesting paper that I saw from Mobile Kai was that, I don't remember exactly which university, but university from Australia. What he presented was that not only measuring the usability of AR application, but measuring public reaction. So he did this AR testing at the bus station. He actually recorded how public reacting to this candidate is using their application. So he reported that like X% number of public reached the candidate asking them, what are you doing? X percentage public just didn't even pay attention to those candidates. So really thinking about how those public reaction will impact those user experience was kind of an interesting idea as well. So those are really different things that we all have to consider in terms of really understanding user experience piece and evaluating our concept in that AR application. If you haven't really looked at it, Google it. I'm sure there are information about it from Mobile Kai last year.
Okay, then I guess I will follow up with a final question, unless anyone else has any. But what, besides your companies and whatnot, what are some really good user design experiences that you've seen in AR that are more, I guess, not necessarily papers, but you've seen working, either brand campaigns or something like that, but you were like, that was a good, user design?
I think what Technical Illusions is doing with Cast AR is going to be really interesting. It's well worth to follow and watch what they're up to. They took that research from Valve, which Valve allowed when they left, and they're just smart minds and really creative, and I was quite impressed with their prototype.
I think it's really cool what folks like Sphero are doing to create, toys that have an augmented capability to them. I think that whole spirit of play and, sort of combining the digital and physical in a magical way is just superb.
And any comments or no?
The good thing is that I've seen many really great examples from this conference. I was so happy to see many great design quality commercial application this year from this conference. It's really great to see that finally our design community started to pay attention to AR design solution. Now, because AR has an interaction with a physical object, there's a beauty that I see that a lot of best solutions really have that great cohesive interaction and relationship with the physical object interaction.
Okay, so if no more questions, then thank you very much. Another round of applause, please. And thank you, audience. We are done now with the AWE, except for the closing thing in the main hall. So thanks, and hopefully see you guys next year.